What's going on, everyone? Today we're doing wiring. I know that electrical work is kind of intimidating for a lot of people, and I think it used to be for me too, but I feel pretty comfortable with it now. There's really no electrical problem that I haven't been able to solve given enough time and the right tools. Today I'm making basically a whole wiring harness from scratch for the BMW Bobber, based around the Motogadget M unit. If you're watching this video, you probably know what a Motogadget M unit is, but if you don't, real quick, it's basically a computerized control box that you can put onto most motorcycles, and it handles everything on the bike barring the ignition system and the charging system. The idea being that it simplifies your wiring harness, reducing or even eliminating the relays that are in the system. It has built-in circuit protection, so you don't need as many fuses, and has a bunch of cool features like programmable turn signals, and if you have the Bluetooth version, it actually will turn the bike on when you approach with your smartphone. Do you need one of these for a custom bike? Absolutely not. But if you want to do a custom bike and you want to keep a lot of those creature comforts, this is a pretty good way to do it. So I've gone ahead and made a little progress on the wiring harness. I'm not going to show you guys how to crimp connectors and stuff because there are videos on the internet on that. And in fact, there's probably as many videos as there are ways for people to make electrical connections. Everybody seems to have a different way to do it and everybody else is wrong, so you figure it out. I kind of think about electricity like a fluid, like water, where the positive 12-volt signal is the high ground and the negative ground is, well, the ground, sea level. And obviously, it's not the perfect analogy. There's cases where that doesn't work. But for the most part, you can draw a line from the positive terminal down along your wiring and eventually end up at a ground. And it's going to light up lights or spark plugs or whatever along the way. You can picture switches and relays like dams that can open and close to let water flow. Something else that really helps me is pre-planning the stuff. I know that I'm going to be rewiring this thing from scratch, so it worked for me to just take a literally blank sheet of paper and draw out an electrical diagram that worked with the stuff that I had. Didn't have anything that I didn't need. So here on my messy workbench, so it's the original sketch that I did. Oh, let's put it down. This is the original sketch that I did. It's not that easy to read, but it's all there, and so I knew roughly what I needed to do. So then I moved over here to my iPad, where I used a drawing program and made it a little cleaner. I guess if you want to screenshot this is the time to do that. Many of the airheads are essentially the same wiring-wise. There's small changes here and there. So that wiring diagram should work for pretty much any airhead. You'll essentially be keeping the ignition system and the charging system the same, but everything else is basically brand new. Underneath the transmission, right in front of the rear wheel, is where I hid the small lithium-ion battery. I do have a positive lead, I just haven't hooked it up yet. I have an earlier video showing how exactly I made this piece. From there, the ground cable sneaks up around to the side of the transmission, where it connects to the transmission right here at this bolt, which is the factory spot. This here is an electronic speed sensor, so that it's going to work with our gauge. And the positive cable comes up, around, and down to our starter. Now the M unit functions as a starter relay, so I've eliminated it completely. And that makes the starting circuit actually pretty simple. You've got your 12-volt power to the starter, just runs directly from the battery. A line comes off of that same post and goes to the diode board. And then I ran the 12-volt constant power for the M unit right off the starter post. This black cable here comes out of the starter output, and this is essentially the same wire that came off of the starter relay. It just goes to that spade connector right there in the starter. This blue wire is also factory. Normally this goes to the starter relay, but eventually this ends up at the generator light, as in on the gauge cluster, that light right here that says generator or gen. Essentially at low RPM that light would come on. The reason that it's important to keep that, or at least replace it with a resistor of similar draw, it functions to actually keep the alternator excited You remove that, your bike will not charge. That blue wire is going to get attached to either an incandescent bulb or a resistor, and the other side of that is going to tie into one of the auxiliary 12-volt outputs on the M unit. Some of you astute observers might have noticed that I don't have a fuse between the battery and the M unit, which is something that they say to do, but it's not for the sake of the M unit itself. It has built-in protections and stuff. You don't have to worry about that piece. Instead, what Motogadget claims is the reason for the fuse is in case your voltage regulator fails. The thing is, BMW didn't have a fuse protecting the voltage regulator on this bike, so I've elected not to install one currently. I might change my mind, we'll see. So I've pulled a couple pieces of wire for the neutral switch and the oil pressure line. And what I'm going to do is use heat shrink tubing to keep that all together so it's looking nice. Because my plan is to run it up along the inside of this frame rail here. A roll of heat shrink tubing is pretty cheap, and it's a lot less labor intensive than wrapping it with electrical tape. Got the headlight bucket mounted and wired in. Also have the ignition key, and that's wired in there too. I was going to start working on wiring the gauge in, and then I realized I should probably mount the gauge first. We had originally planned on using a different gauge, and then last minute decided to go with this Motogadget piece. So I need to make a mount for it. Plain and simple, nothing too crazy. I think my favorite detail, of course, is down underneath here where I drilled a hole in the headlight bucket to run the wiring through, so it looks extra clean and tidy. Next step is to wire the gauge into place, but unfortunately I'm kind of out of time this week. The other thing that I'm working on is mounting the handlebars. If you remember, they're 1.1/8" fat bars, so I'm making with the CNC mill a whole new set of handlebar clamps that look just like the old ones, except they're a little wider so that they fit 1.1/8" bars. Since it's CNC'd, we might do a small run of them, so if fitting fat bars on your airhead is something you're interested in, let me know. That's probably going to be part 2 of this series, is making those handlebar clamps and then finishing up this wiring. Alright y'all, thanks for watching, thank you for sticking around, I'll see you next time, and yeah, have a good one.